Hey everyone, I'm Logan. Starting a channel called Critical EDH. Uh, Basically, we're just a play group from the Denver, Colorado area. We are pretty much based out of Littleton, like South Denver. We've been grinding tournaments and hosting tournaments, going to local tournaments, and now we're going to start traveling for tournaments too. A lot of our players are doing really well, and we're having a lot of fun. So I thought we'd start making some content some more like discussions and deck lists and deck techs, all that stuff. I basically wanted to cover my run on Snowy Summit 2 that just happened yesterday. It was a really, really long tournament. I think about 17 hours is what I was looking at. Probably up for about 20 to 21 hours total. Um, excuse me. Yeah, it was just a long day. I had a ton of fun. Got to grind some games with some, world class players. I mean, everyone was great. Um, had some interesting judge calls and interactions too. I'm not going to be covering like the tournament and all the stuff that happened in it, like in its entirety. I'm sure everyone's got some really great stories from that. But I did want to talk about the deck that I played quite a bit and sort of my experience playing it. Why I kind of made some of the choices I made and why I'm running the cards I'm running. Um, I guess how I feel about it, my play style, and what I've been doing. So yeah, let's get into it. So Snowy Summit 2 is the second event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the first one last year, but this one I was like, you know what, I got to support our local scene. I have to represent Denver well, and I think we did. I think Denver really showed up for this tournament. I know our top four was all Denver locals. So that was awesome. But we had a lot of guys from Utah, a couple from Arizona, I think some from even way farther that flew in as well. It's 128 players, 5 rounds of Swiss, cut to top 16, and then obviously cut to top four. And yeah, it was a long day. No complaints though. I mean, I had a ton of fun. But yeah, it's just it's a lot of playing, a lot of grinding, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like you're a bit shot, and you're like, I don't know, man, just resolve your spell, go for it. But yeah, so to get to the deck, I played Glarb. I think Glarb is poised to be in a really good spot in the meta. I think it's definitely a unique take, at least from my perspective, on the cards I chose, and I made a lot of calls on the meta based on just what I thought would arrive and what was going to show up, and really how I've been feeling playing in Denver. Um, it's really coming down to since the bans, it's Rhystic Study and Flash, and that's pretty much it. Like, if you don't have a Rhystic or a Mystic Remora, um, you're not really doing a whole lot. And I kind of was looking at that and going, okay, well, I think I was like on the way home from work one day, and I was listening to a podcast with Freedom Waffle. I don't know if you know Freedom Waffle, but I think he ranked like number 3 on the leaderboard right now in Elo. Um, been playing Kinnan, and he's been playing a clone list Kinnan, kind of like back before the bans, how Dockside was legal, and you just try to clone a Dockside if you could. But obviously now it's not legal anymore, so now he's trying to clone Rhystic Study and Smothering Tithe. Round one, I know, was pretty contentious. I think it went 60 minutes overtime, if not even more. Um, he and Jason Doan, who's not related to me, by the way. My name's Logan Doan. Jason is just a good friend of mine. We happen to have the same last name, but we're not related. Um, Jason's also another really good player, really known for his blue farm. Um, they were stuck in a pod with an Elevir, and I wasn't really fully aware of the whole situation, but I know that Freedom had some sort of clone of multiple Rhystic Studies and/or multiple Smothering Ties, and was trying to put wins on the stack at instant speed on Elevir's turn. And that resulted in going way over time. Um, Again, this is not me complaining necessarily about that, but this is kind of what I expected coming into the tournament. Um, so that sort of thing. And like I said, if you don't have a Rhystic or a Mystic or a Smothering Tithe, you're not really doing a whole lot. I guess you can try to jam through wins, but if other people have those resources, those value engines, it's really, really hard to jam. So yeah, anyway, I was listening to that podcast, listened to Freedom, and I was like, these are great ideas. I need to include Clever Impersonator. I need to probably include Copy Enchantment. Um, and then I kind of took it a little step farther, and I was like, okay, well, if I can not only clone them, um, is Glarb a good enough value engine that I can sit behind Glarb and use Glarb as my value engine and actually just destroy everyone else's Rhystic? Um, so yeah, I've included a few cards to do that. My meta call, kind of the night before, was Bane of Progress. This card got me out of Swiss. It's brutal. Um, it destroys all artifacts and enchantments when it enters the battlefield. It's a creature, so it's basically uncounterable. Um, it it's just not what you want to see from a Glarb list, like me casting it off the top. Everyone kind of just stares at you and goes, "What does that card do?" I'm like, "I'm going to destroy all artifacts and enchantments." Thing gets huge, but that's kind of incidental. Usually, I'm just like leaving it up as a blocker for a Timna or a Timna deck, and that's fine. I mean, if I can swing in for lethal, great, but I'm not really that concerned about that. It was pretty much just trying to keep Magda, Sisay, Kinnan, TNT, TNK in check. And there's a few Shorkai players too. Um, my friend Jay plays Shorkai, and he's like, dude, I run the artifact lands. Like, you're going to stone rain me with Bane of Progress. And I was like, well, it is what it is. So yeah, Bane of Progress. That's kind of my one sweeper. Obviously, Culling Ritual. This deck pretty much entirely dodges Culling Ritual. Yeah, I mean it might hit my artifacts or whatever, but like I'm making a ton of mana after. Um, and then Reverent Silence. This is a card that Reverent Silence is a card that it's just brutal. It's if I control a forest, I can have each other player gain 6 life instead of paying its casting cost. Casting cost is 4, which means I can cast it off the top, even if I'm paying the additional cost. Glarb lets me play this off the top, and I can destroy all enchantment. Obviously, this hits my clones as well, but um, again, if I'm running this or if I'm casting this, I choose when to cast it. If I'm casting it at all, and then I can make a informed decision as to whether it's sense to cast it or not based on the current game state. A lot of this is like using these cards to, I guess, using information to decide when to cast your card. I mean, that sounds super simple, but you might look at this deck and say, well, there's a lot of anti synergies, and you're in one spot trying to control what people are doing, and then it may actually look like a permissive list where I actually have a permissive playstyle. I pretty much let people do whatever they want until they're trying to win. And then I'm like, okay, no, please don't do that. Don't win. Someone is calling me to talk about the Glarb deck. Um, yeah, let me message him. All right. So anyway, yeah, I mean, the deck is there's 100 cards in the deck. You can look at a deck and say, well, I can kind of see what you're going for like this with these cards. But what it comes down to is pilot play style and what you're trying to do, I guess. A lot of LARB decks are running Doomsday or they're running Reanimator. I'm running neither. Basically trying to be as consistent as possible, trying to grind out value in super grindy meta and get to the point where, okay, my win is inevitable. Um, and once it's there, no one can do anything about it. The window is wide open. A couple other just kind of pieces I've included. I talked about Clever Impersonator a little bit. I was running Phyrexian Metamorph before. That seemed like more of an obvious choice. But when it came down to testing Phyrexian Metamorph, despite it being easier to cast, I found that I really don't want to clone any creatures. And somebody else having the One Ring already, not really where I wanted to be or what I wanted to rely on. Clever Impersonator, while it does cost more and it is harder to cast, it can copy Mothering Tithe, it can copy a Rhystic Study. At worst, it can copy a Mystic Remora. Those type of things where I'm like, this is just way more flexible. Clever Impersonator is an excellent, excuse me, excellent card. I think that the flexibility is what I value more than the easiness to cast of the friction. Um, let's see what else. Notion Thief, more draw hate. Um, I love putting a Notion Thief into play in response to someone's Wandering Trigger with like 4 or 5 counters on it, and go, okay. Yes, it dies to a slight gust of wind. I don't expect it to last very long. It's not really that important for me to last very long. There are other incidental things about Notion Thief. One, it is blue-black, so it pitches well to Chrome Walk. It is also blue, pitches well to Force of Will, Force of Negation, and Misdirection, all 3 of which I'm running. Notion Thief is castable off the top with Glarb, of course. Notion Thief also, well, let me start over. There's cards in white, especially, that are forced draws that your opponents run, such as Archivist of Ogma and Esper Sentinel. Those are forced draws if your opponents do not, or if they trigger them, and like let's say they don't pay for Esper Sentinel, your opponent must draw a card, which means you must draw a card with Notion Thief. I think the fear with Notion Thief is having it on the field and then trying to resolve with Thassa's Oracle. But in my experience, Notion Thief never really sticks around. So I'm not really. Let's see. Other notable inclusions or exclusions. I am running a very light dork. I'm running Deathrite Shaman, Delighted Halfling, Elvish Spirit Guide. If you really count that as a dork, it's more of just a boost, and Bloom Tender and Birds of Paradise. Bloom Tender's been in and out, but the fact that your commander has 3 pips, yes, it does tap for 3, but it dies again to a slight gust of wind. It is a 1/1. The nice thing is curving out a Bloom Tender on turn 1, then playing Glarb on 2. Hopefully you can have the Bloom Tender untapped, and then you tap Bloom Tender for 3 or something like that. And Bloom Tender is really excellent in that situation. We're also on Seedborn Muse, so being able to untap Bloom Tender repeatedly is super nice. A lot of my 3-cost spells are 2 and a pip, so like Dryad of Elysian Grove and Opposition Agent. Bloom Tender lets us cast those. Obviously, it lets us cast Copy Enchantment and Rhystic Study as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't really help with Necropotence or Counterbalance. We'll get to those spells a bit later. Let's see what else we got. Kitsa. Talk about Kitsa for a moment. Kitsa is a okay card. Not super enthused about it, but what it lets us do. First of all, it's only I really say this tongue in cheek. I said the same thing about Notion Thief. Kitsa pitches to Force of Will, Force of Negation, and Misdirection. It's okay to put under Chrome Mox as well because it's not crucial to how the deck works. But if you do have Kitsa in play, it turns on our Mox Amber. It also lets us loot and look through our deck a little bit deeper. Especially helps us find lands. We're trying to play additional lands off of things like a Dryad of Leasing Grove and Exploration. That brings me to Dryad of Leasing Grove and Exploration. Oh, before I go off Kitsa, Kitsa does combo with Dramatic Reversal, which is basically Seaborn Muse Light or Seaborn Muse at instant speed. You can cast a spell, then copy the Dramatic Reversal, untap everything, make 2 mana, retap Kitsa, produce infinite mana. If Glarb's on the field, you surveil your entire deck, or you surveil until you find a card that you're able to cast, and then cast that card with your unbound mana. Yeah, it's okay. I would say that the goal is not to combo off with Kitsa, although it is possible. Dramatic Reversal seems good enough on its own. I was running Dramatic Reversal for a while without Kitsa. I've tested Kitsa without Reversal. They both feel fine. The goal of the deck is not to combo off. I'm not saying that it's not possible. There's plenty of things that combo in the deck. We can tutor our opponent's libraries for other combos. Obviously, those things are just totally situational. The deck is pretty much designed to be as flexible as possible and just grind out through a game and close it out. Back to Dryad of Leasing Grove and Exploration. Glarb has the ability to play lands off the top of your library. I am pretty much trying to do that at every point in the game. Every turn that I have, play a land off the top. The reason is you play lands off the top and not from your hand, you are digging deeper through your deck. And while it doesn't seem like a lot, this whole deck is built around incremental advantage. So if I'm able to play more than one land per turn, I'm constantly looking through my deck, trying to find spells that are either castable or they're the next thing I draw from a Rhystic Study or my Consecrated Sphinx or anything like that. Card selection is extremely powerful. It's a very silent effect. It's really not interactable by your opponents. They can remove Glarb, but basically, typically what I do is if someone's threatening to Rollick or Red Blast or whatever Glarb, I basically look at them and go, are you really trying to do that? Like, what am I doing that is like offensive to you and your game plan with my commander that I'm not attacking with? I'm looking at the top of my library and just kind of filtering cards into my hand or my graveyard. And I give examples of, can you possibly save those spells for something more important that wins the game? Such as a Hazel's Brewmaster or anything like that. And I'm like, okay, can we just wait? I'm not doing anything. And that's true. It's largely true. Glarb is Glarb is good because he doesn't do anything. I mean, he does, right? From our perspective, Glarb is he's our draw engine ish. He doesn't inherently draw a card. Awesome. He just selects kind of what you put in your hand, or at least helps you do that. That's what the deck is built around. Trying to selectively put cards in your hand, gain minor advantage through any way possible, and I guess let people play their game and stop them from winning. And if you can stop them from winning over and over again, or you can help other people stop wins, eventually you'll have a window in which you can present a win yourself. and you'll have plenty of protection, or you won't even need the protection. um, yeah. So a couple other things about Dryad and um, exploration. Like I said, playing the additional lands for turn. There's a couple reasons why that I find is very powerful. Again, it's more of a silent reason. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm ramping so fast and so quickly. You do ramp quite fast, playing multiple lands per turn. But one thing to realize is that playing lands off the top of your library does not trigger Rhystic Study and does not trigger Smothering Tithe. Um, I think not triggering those cards is, again, it's like a silent reason it's good. So if you're unable, or if you're not unable, if you are able to not trigger those cards and continue to ramp yourself and find cards that actually do something, or draw into cards that actually do something, um, you're not giving your opponents advantage by playing things like mana rocks or playing things like creatures that might trigger study. So I'm much lower on the dork package than I am on the lands. We're about 29 lands, but I think that's kind of the right amount. It's felt pretty good. It allows us to get a pretty consistent turn 2 Glarb at minimum. Um, yeah. There's a couple other things that Dryad does, kind of incidental. You're going to hear me talk about a lot of things in this deck that are incidental. And this deck is a sum of its parts. It's not, yeah, I mean, there's bombs that we talked about. We talked about Bane of Progress. I mentioned Consecrated Sphinx. Obviously, those cards are your bomb, but all of the other incidental factors add up to making the deck what it is. One of those incidental factors is that Dryad of Elysian Grove is mana fixing. Um, it turns your lands into lands of any basic land type. So that includes fetch lands. Fetch lands now tap for mana. Well, that's pretty good, right? Because if there's an opposition agent on the field, on your opponent's field, and you have only fetch lands in your hand, or you're only able to find fetch lands and you have a Dryad, you're still able to play the game. You're still able to ramp out, um, and your opponents can't, or at least the people that don't have Oppo can't. So that helps with that situation a little bit. That's come up more than once. Um, the other thing that it lets you do is play fetch lands and then leave them untapped. You can tap them for mana, or you can represent them as mana for counterspells and things like that. Or you can selectively shuffle your library with a fetch land, and just leave them on the field. I do this all the time. That's the reason that in our lands package, we're also on Urborg and Yavimaya. Those also turn our fetch lands into lands that tap. Fortunately, those don't let you tap them for blue, but I find that these are generally good enough. It also lets our Cavern of Souls, our Gemstone Caverns, Gaia's Cradle if we don't have any creatures for some reason, Minimo, Otawara. It lets us fix those colors. It also lets us not take damage from Tarnished Citadel and Ancient Tomb, and Mana Confluence. Unfortunately, City of Brass will always, whenever it's tapped, to deal damage to you. But yeah, I mean, like I said, those are incidental things, and that's like silent power. Um, it doesn't seem very powerful, doesn't seem very meaningful, but again, it's a 5 to 10% advantage that we have that other decks don't have. Let's see if there's any other creatures. Consecrated Sphinx. So I mentioned this earlier, but Consecrated Sphinx to me was a meta call. If somebody has a Rhystic Study, I want 2 Rhystic Studies. How do I get 2 Rhystic Studies? I play Consecrated. It is literally the casting cost of 2 Rhystic Studies. but it also works on their draw step. So if it's a 6 mana draw 6 and it dies on your next turn, or dies on the turn cycle, I'm okay with that because my card quality is really, really high. And usually that's enough to dig out of games, dig ourselves out of holes. It's a mid-range breaker, so you can break parity on a Rhystic Study by having a Consecrated Sphinx. But the problem is, you have to watch out for things like OBM and Smothering Tithe. I'm very cautious to play this against a Smothering Tithe. I'm also very cautious to play this against an OBM. I value Glarb pretty highly as far as a creature on the field. It represents counterspells off the top of the library. It represents value off the top of the library. It represents card selection. It also represents fierce guardianship, but it's not a combo piece. So there's plenty of games I win with Glarb dead, or I haven't even cast him. It happens sometimes, but for the most part, I'm trying to get Glarb out early and kind of retain him as the Valiant engine for the deck. Fairy Mastermind is kind of like a light Consecrated Sphinx. It seems good enough. Again, it dies to a slight gust of wind, but that's okay. Creature-wise, Seedborn Muse. Let's talk about Seedborn Muse a little bit. Many of you are probably familiar with Seedborn Muse in Kinnan and TNT lists, Timna Thrasios lists, where you have Thrasios as an outlet, or even Rog Thrasios, Tevish Thrasios, things like that, where you're able to untap, pump mana into Thrasios, use Thrasios as repeating value. Seedborn Muse doesn't really work like that in Glarb. Basically, what it's letting you do is, first of all, if you have a Rhystic Study or something like that, it lets you untap Glarb every time in response to a Rhystic Study trigger. You can tap Glarb, see if it's really the card you want to draw. Kind of helps you filter with that. Alternatively, just Seedborn Muse is untapping all of your lands. Being able to present mana at any point is you threatening to do something about something that someone's doing. So I can resolve a Seedborn Muse more effectively and more consistently in this deck, because when I cast it, if someone motions to counter it or is poised to counter it or do something about it, I look at them and I again say, I don't have Thrasios, I don't have Kinnan. I'm using this for incidental value. It's a good card in my deck, but it's like not a great card. It's good enough. I also run the One Ring, so that's kind of like the most ideal outcome with Seedborn Muse. It's not an all-star of the deck. It's not a card I'm like regularly tutoring for, but it's good enough. And like that's this deck in a nutshell, is that most cards are just good enough. I think there's a lot of tendency to focus on cards that are really, really good, or like win cons, and oh my gosh, so this combos with this. Right, and those things may be true, and if you can pull them off consistently, great. All I know is that every turn I'm going to untap, I'm going to draw a single card for turn, and that's the way that Magic the Gathering works, right? So if I can make those things better, and make them more consistent, or select the cards that I draw, or that's kind of what I want to do with the deck. Seedborn Muse helps with that. It also just kind of helps me represent mana for counterspells, or things that flash speed with Flood Color, High Fate Trickster, Born Upon Wind, etc. Let's get into some of the sorceries and the bigger cards that are a bit more important. Reverent Silence, we talked about a little bit. This card's just incredible. I love finding this off Mystical Tutor, and then casting it into 2 or 3 Rhystic Studies. This is one of the cards, along with Culling Ritual and Bane of Progress, that I would consider the main sweepers in the deck. They're also really, really good political tools because I find that you can, for the most part, because it's affecting everyone, if there's another player that's like down bad or in a bad position, I can maybe leverage like a swan song or something like that to have them help protect this card. Because typically, if I'm casting a culling ritual at the top, I might not have anything in hand. I might not have anything that's like worthwhile. An empty culling ritual doesn't really hurt this deck a ton. It lets us keep our Seaborn Muse or anything like that. Where I'm just like, look, I'm just trying to wipe the board so we don't lose easily. Reverent Silence is largely the same way. But yeah, I mean, I think contextually these cards, while they look like we're trying to do something, that's not always the case. And you can use your words because they don't. Your words don't use the stack. Your words aren't cards in your hand. You can communicate to people. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm being truthful. You can show them your hand if you don't have any tutors. You don't have anything. They're like, look, I'm trying to do this, and they might convince you to not do it right now. Things like that. And you can go, okay, well, maybe now is not really the good time to do a calling ritual. Someone's going to counter it. And if they show you a counterspell, I'll be like, well, okay, well, why don't you hold on to that counterspell for something else? I don't need to cast this calling ritual right now. Let's just survive until the next turn. That's what I'm trying to do. So think of these cards as both ways to get yourself ahead, set people behind, or use them to uh, threaten the board state. Reverent Silence also clears kind of like, obviously it clears like Rhystic, Mystic, Smothering, and helps you push through wins more cleanly. Because if Reverent Silence resolves, if it first of all, if it resolves, you're clearing the way for you to cast more spells. If it doesn't resolve, that means that they're wasting counter magic on Reverent Silence and not using the counter magic on whatever you actually need to do. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 type of card. Culling Ritual's largely the same way. I think Culling Ritual is probably the singular best card in the deck. I find it very hard to lose games if I am able to resolve a Culling Ritual. Beseech Mirror is really, really good. Casting it off the top is obviously possible. You can bargain one of your artifacts that you don't care about. Unfortunately, we don't really have a way to make tokens unless somebody swan songs us and then we bargain the token. But Beseech finds any of these 4-mana spells, such as Culling Ritual, Reverent Silence. It can find Opposition Agent, Clever Impersonator, any of those, and you can cast that spell for free. Sometimes it happens where you're not able to bargain, and that's fine. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll Culling Ritual, get like 12 or 14 mana or something like that, dump a lot of it into Beseech. Oh man, I don't have any artifacts because they all just got wiped, but like, does it really matter because I have so much mana? It just tutors to hand. Obviously, we're on Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor is excellent. Glarb takes freaking cards like Imperial Seal and cards that are not normally that good. I think. Okay, let me couch this in. Obviously, Imperial Seal is an excellent card. In other decks, you have ways to draw the card immediately, such as Gitaxian Probe or the One Ring, or you draw it off of a Rhystic Study trigger, things like that. It is a sorcery, but in this deck, you can put something on top that's much, much more effective and something you can use right now. So, like, let's say I've got 5 mana, cast Imperial Seal. Everyone looks around and goes, okay, cool. I've got Glarb in play. I'm going to put Culling Ritual on top. Put that card on top. Cast Culling Ritual off the top. Everyone looks at you and goes, well, okay, you've only cast 2 spells. I can't trap this. And then it wipes, and then you've got more mana. That's just an example. Obviously, they could have other counter spells, things like that. But that's a way to use Imperial Seal. You can also Imperial Seal a counterspell like Force of Will to the top of your library. Get down into the instance. Put Force of Will on the top of your library. Pass a turn. If Glarb's in play, you're now representing a counterspell that you might not only have like one card in hand or something like that, but you're representing a universal counterspell. And they might not think that you have anything, in which you do. Or you could put a Mind Break trap on top of the library. Or a misdirection. Things like that. So it takes Glarb makes these top deck tutors such as Imperial Seal, Scheming Symmetry, Worldly Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, Mystical Tutor. And it takes them from cards that are staples and good cards to cards that are like, oh, now there's another aspect of this that I kind of need to think about. Is there an immediate use? Sometimes mystical tutoring, because this reveals a card, is in a way more powerful. Because what you can do is with only one blue mana up in response to a counterspell war, and let's say there's a underworld breach on the stack. Your opponents go for a total counterspell war. You have nothing in your hand but mystical tutor and a mana. You're like, guys, I really don't have anything for this. All that. The blue farm or breach player totally taps out for everything. Uses all their interaction, comes back down to the stack and breaches the last thing on the stack. You go, okay, I'm going to mystical tutor. I'm going to put a mind break trap on the top of my library. That's enough sometimes for them to go, okay, well, they just can't go for it. They just can't now because you're representing them. Maybe that's like not the best example. I would say because if breach resolves, like you can't let breach resolve. So, I don't know. Let's say they're fighting over, let's say non-win con. I don't know. Shorkai's fighting over a unwinding clock, right? You can just trap the clock or whatever. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is you can mystical tutor something to the top, reveal it, it stays on top. When you either pass the turn or people are making game actions, they're now cognizant that maybe you have a Force of Will on the top. And then at any point, you could say, I don't like what you're doing. I'm going to cast this. And then if you go, well, hey, I still have that Force of Will on the top of my library. Don't play that spell because I'm really saving it for the next. That's kind of a political tool you can use. Speaking of putting things on top of the library, Noxious Revival is an all-time card that is never getting cut because it lets you reuse cards like Mind Break Trap with Glarb in play. And that's pretty brutal to face as well. Or you could put like Force of Vigor back on top of your library and destroy 2 more Rhystic studies. Or it's just so good. It lets you get your Thoracle back from yard if you need to do that. Yeah. Let's see what else we can talk about. Running a pretty slim removal package. Looking at Abrupt Decay, Chain of Vapor, Cyclonic Rift, Deadly Relic, Force of Vigor, and pretty much it for single target stuff. I guess we have Legolas's Quick Reflexes. I'll talk about that card a little bit. In a little bit. But these cards are either powerful or flexible, or free, or some combination of that. Abrupt Decay is excellent because it can't be countered. It stops breach lines in their tracks for the most part. Really like it for that reason. I rarely use it on Rhystic Study or anything like that unless it's kind of dire. There's a reason for me to do that. Chain of Vapor, Again, super flexible. I don't really care if they bounce anything on my board, except for maybe Glarb sometimes. And I'm like, are you really going to sack a land to bounce my Glarb? Probably not. I'm a little bit leery, I say wary of using this card if I have a Consecrated Sphinx on flare from the sun coming in. Sorry about that. Other than that, Chain of Vapor lets you pick up your Thoracle, Fastest Oracle, and try again. And I do value that pretty highly. I can actually close these blinds. Chain of Vapor also works really well with your mana rocks and Valley Flood Color at instant speed, allowing you to pick up your rocks, recast them, untap Glarb. I think it's largely influenced by my play of Rogsai. I really like Chain of Vapor. It's a hard card to utilize sometimes, and especially if you're not experienced utilizing Chain of Vapor. I can see why a lot of people don't like it. You might feel more comfortable on something like Into the Flood Maw. I think that's kind of a flex slot you can. Cyclonic Rift. I am actually pretty low on this card in general, but in this deck, I have the ability to make a lot of mana, and showing the Cyclonic Rift, even just like pulling it out of your hand and showing the table that you have it, is pretty strong because you can threaten a Cyc Rift and not actually do anything. Also, it is a way to force interaction. I've done this multiple times where with a Seedborn Muse, I'm constantly untapping, I have a Cyc Rift in my hand, goes to someone's turn who has a better board state than the rest of the table. I force a Cyc Rift, and then that forces them to use their interaction or have a turn that doesn't really do anything. I like it for those reasons. That's why this is in. It also gets rid of Opposition Agent, Drannith Magistrate, things that might be in our way, Weathered Runestone, stuff like that. So in this list, it's pretty flexible, and it's single target removal, kind of. You just kind of have to be aware of it. I think the one game I've used it was to bounce a Blood Moon, which does hurt us quite a lot. Force of Vigor is kind of on the edge of going out now that I'm running so many artifact and enchantment sweepers, but just the fact that I can exile a green card and cast it for free, remove some rocks or remove some enchantments. I think the biggest thing you have to be aware of with Force of Vigor is potential deflecting swats. I'm kind of always looking around and going like, okay, well, if I have a Force of Vigor, is this going to get swatted to something that I control, or is it going to get used in a way that might hurt me or hurt the table? So just be aware of that. Force of Vigor also stops stuff with like Chromatic Orrery. I don't know how often that's coming up in your games, but there's quite a few Sisseys and Revies and things like that are running Chromatic Orrery, or Shurikais that are running Coveted Jewel, for example. It does help to stop those. Legolas's quick reflexes. Gosh. I don't know. I will probably have like I could probably have a dissertation about this card. Legolas's quick reflexes is a card that in this deck is it is never getting cut. It is the problem solver. If you have a Glarb that has no summoning sickness, make sure it's tapped first. So pop a Surveil. I say that all the time. I kind of joke. I'm like, I always say like pop a hot Surveil because like my commander doesn't do anything. It lets me look at the top two cards of my library. I can put them in the graveyard if I want to, or rearrange them. And like compared to Thrasios, where it like puts a land on the battlefield or draws a card, like it doesn't feel that powerful, right? So sometimes if I have a Legolas's quick reflexes, and I'll surveil, and then I look at the table. I'm like, okay, can I surveil? And they're like, yeah, sure. Surveil. Then I cast Legolas's quick reflexes. It has split second, so can't be responded to. Gives Glarb hexproof. It also gives him reach, which is pretty cool because he has death touch already. But he untaps. Okay, well, this is great. Until end of turn, it says whenever it becomes tapped, deal damage equal to its power up to one target creature. What that means is because it has death touch, you can at instant speed shoot anything and kill it, so long as it doesn't have indestructible or hexproof. I use it to kill Magda, kill Kinnan, kill Void Winnower, kill to say kill anything. Sometimes I kill Tivit. Like, yeah, it's word 3, but I can usually pay for it. It just solves a ton of problems. The other very cool interaction that is, again, incidental is that with Valley of Floodcaller, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Glarb like untaps, and then you can retap him and shoot in a stack war when you're this way. If you have Valley Floodcaller triggers on the stack in a stack war, on top of all of that, you can Legolas's quick reflexes, and then as the stack resolves with those untapped triggers, you can go down and untap and tap Glarb and shoot things down. Because most people will respond to your Valley Floodcaller triggers with whatever spell they're playing. So it's just such a good card, and there's really not much people can do. I use it to kill Seaborn Muses, kill Timna, whatever. Doesn't matter. Sometimes I hold it, but oh man, it wasn't in this tournament, but it was earlier this week. Someone was going for a Brewmaster win in response to the Brewmaster's ability targeting a devoted druid in the yard. I played a Legolas's quick reflexes and then shot the Brewmaster. And they didn't win. So, I mean, it solves a ton of problems. Great. All right. There's really not much else to say. This is a pretty standard, I would say standard instant package. There's a couple minor things that I'll just kind of gloss over really quick. Dramatic Reversal, spoke about this earlier. It's Seedborn Muse ish at instant speed. Also can incidentally combo with Kitsa, Limdol's Vault. I've been off and on this card, but I replaced Wishclaw Talisman with it, and I'm feeling really good about it now. I do like that it has 2 pips because that again pitches both the forces and misdirection, and pitches to Chrome Mox pretty well as well. But this lets me tutor to the top essentially, and typically we don't have to go that deep to find a misdirection, force of will, for example. Really, really liking Limdol's Vault now. I mean, I guess I always liked it, but I think in the tournament meta and tournament scene, I think the card is a bit better than I had originally thought. I'm not really running any misdirection or spell pierce, those type of counter spells, because I think they're a bit too narrow from what I'm looking for. I'm feeling pretty comfortable on the amount of counter spells that I have because, again, I'm more playing into like a permissive play style where I'm valuing the counter spells that I have, and I'm not going to use them until I'm like really forced to use them. And I think Spell Pierce is exceptionally bad, except for the early game. And to be honest, like I think the early game is not quite my responsibility or this deck's responsibility to manage. If somebody's going to go for it on turn 2 or turn 3, there's not much we can do, to be honest. And I think a single spell pierce is really not going to fix that problem. We do have a mental misstep, but again, I'm valuing. I'll talk about misstep in a second, but I value this card pretty highly, and I probably won't early game somebody's winning. I think spell pierce, along with miscast, are pretty bad right now because a lot of people are running 5, and if they can just pay for it, then card. Luster Storm's already kind of on the edge of that because there's so many decks that can make so much mana, but obviously this is really good on top of the stack war. That's why Fluster Storm's still in. I do want to speak about mental misstep for a moment. I tweeted about this on a Twitter account that no one follows on my at critical EDH on Twitter. Mental misstep. I really, I can't. I'm not misstepping Esper Sentinels. I'm not misstepping Mana Vaults or Soul Rings or even Mystic Remora. I'm not doing that anymore. Mental misstep is probably the single most single counterspell that I respect the most late game and that I'm very wary of. I'm constantly looking at people's graveyards or making mental notes if they have used their mental misstep already. Pretty much every deck in blue will run it. So I think it's worthwhile to keep track of if they have used it. I am much rather used to hold the mental misstep for a silence or a deconsult or a veil of summer, anything that's protecting their win. I'd rather not waste a bigger fierce guardianship on. So that's kind of what I feel about mental misstep. If you have questions about that, I'd be happy to elaborate. But I find that I am wanting mental misstep later in the game, and if I use it early in the game, obviously I can't have it later in the game unless I were to somehow get it back. I think that I don't think wasting resources on getting it back is worthwhile. Either just hold on to it and again play permissively and kind of let people do their thing, and then just save it for a demonic consultation. And we all go, okay, well, I guess he's not winning now. So yeah. I do want to talk about the artifacts package. I think that's the next thing that's worth talking about. Artifacts that make mana are great. Artifacts that are mana positive are fine if they're colorless. I think talismans are a losing proposition generally. I'm only on 2 of them. Spellware Stone's probably in and out. I don't like that turn 1. Sometimes Spellware Stone doesn't make me mana, so I'm currently off of it. I can understand the argument for it. I think that's kind of a personal choice. So right now I'm on Arcane Signet and Talisman of Dominance. I think there's an argument to run the green-blue Talisman as well. Or instead of Talisman of Dominance. That's kind of up to you. Yes. I'm liking Mox Amber because I'm almost always playing Glarb, or I have Kitsa. I always play Glarb. Mox Amber is pretty consistent. 11 artifacts is not enough artifacts to run Mox Opal. Fortunately, I just don't think it is. I'm thinking like my kind of standard is like 14 minimum, ideally probably like 16. Yeah, and 11's nowhere close. A lot of people ask me about Grim Monolith. We have lots of expensive spells. Look at Finale of Devastation, Culling Ritual, Clever Impersonator, Consecrated Sphinx, Bane of Progress. Helps us cast all of those. Also, untapping it with Seedborn Muse and or Dramatic Reversal, same as Mana Vault. I think these spells are pretty powerful to have all of that extra mana if we have an untapper. So I like it for those reasons. Obviously, these also help us cast the One Ring. Really not much else to say about this. Sensei's Divining Top. Obviously, we're really super heavy into top deck manipulation. There's been many a game where I have a Seedborn Muse and a Sensei's Top, and nothing else. And what you can do with Sensei's Top and Seedborn Muse is look at the top 3 of your library with Sensei's Top by paying a mana, rearrange them as you need, tap Glarb, take the 2 that you rearranged, put them into the yard, and then pay another mana with Sensei's Top, look at the next 3. And this helps you select a card to put on top, and then you can either draw it with top or cast it with Glarb before it even comes around to your turn. It can help you dig yourself out of situations. Obviously, top is really, really good with counterbalance. That just, even more top deck manipulation to passively counter people's spells. I will talk about and in a second. Let's think if there's. There was a time I was running Bolas's Citadel and Sensei's Top. I found that Bolas's Citadel, again, is a very spiky card. While it is powerful, Glarb lets me kind of do the same thing already. It's hard to cast 3 black and 3 colorless. Yes, it goes pseudo infinite with Sensei's Top, but I haven't. When I was running it, I wasn't winning any more games than I am now. In fact, it was just feeling like a dead card in hand. So basically, if I had Bolas's Citadel in my hand and I couldn't cast it, I was like, man, this could be any other card and I'd be okay. So that's why it's not in right now. Let's talk about the enchantment package. Copy Enchantment is another Rhystic Study or a Smothering Tithe. I think it feels great. Super easy to cast, just as easy to cast as Rhystic Study is. There's really not much else to say. Mirror Maid is also a consideration. If you prefer to run Mirror Maid, you can. Mirror Maid is 1 and 2 blue, but lets you copy an artifact or enchantment. I don't prefer Mirror Maid in this deck because it's harder to cast, and the added flexibility of copying an artifact is not something that I'm super interested in. It just hasn't really come up. Kind of the same reason I'm off of Metamorph, Phyrexian Metamorph, because copying an artifact or creature is like me. Exploration, talked about that earlier. Obviously, playing an additional land for 1 mana is great. In one of the weekly tournaments, I kept a mulligan to 6 that consisted of Exploration, Mystic Remora, and 4 lands. So on turn 1, seat 1, I drew a card for turn. I played land, Exploration, land, fish, and passed. The entire table went, holy shit, we're so cooked. And I was like, it's fine. The next turn, I played land, Glarb, drew a Fierce Guardianship, and passed. And so I had 1 mana. I think I had a Swan Song and a Fierce Guardianship on turn 2. And I'm like, I'm okay to just like sit behind this for like forever. This card is incredibly powerful. It's never getting cut. Every Glarb list should run it, no matter what archetype of Glarb you are playing. You should be on Exploration at a minimum. Whether you're on Azusa or Loot or Dryad or AC or Gitrog or whatever extra lands, that's up to you. This card needs to go in every Glarb list. Speaking of top deck manipulation, another card I could probably write an entire essay about is Necropotence. I think a lot of people struggle with this card because in a Rogsai or Blue Farm archetype type deck, you're not able to. You're doing a blind Necropotence. So you have Necropotence in play. You go, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna take like, I don't know, 15 or 20 life, put 20 cards in my hand. If I don't find Born Upon a Wind or a way to go for it, I'm exiling 15 cards, and then I have to keep 7 and pass. And while that's incredibly powerful, Glarb has the unique ability of looking at the top card of your library while you're necropotencing or in between each pay 1 life. You can decide whether to exile it or not. You can do a, I don't know, what's the opposite of a blind necropotence? You do a visual necropotence where you're like, okay, well, I don't need to necro for 20 to get what I want. I can stop exactly where I want and then exile what I don't need. Necropotence also has a very, very favorable interaction with Counterbalance and Glarb on the field, where you can, in response to the Counterbalance trigger on somebody else's turn or your own turn, exile a card with Necropotence if the top card of your library does not match the mana value of the spell being played. And you can continue to do this until you find a card that does, and then you resolve your Counterbalance trigger, and they go, oh, dang, my spell's countered. And then now you're able to continually do this in a very parasitic manner in which the table will be extremely unhappy for you to like continue doing. But I can guarantee you, if you have Counterbalance and Necropotence and Glarb on the field, it will come around to your next turn, and or you will win the game. It is just that freaking powerful. Sylvan Library, it's a, man, every TNT list that doesn't run this card, they're out of their minds. Sylvan Library is such a good card. It's even better with Glarb. Sylvan Library and Glarb is just, if I, in the finals of Snowy Summit, I kept a turn 1 or turn 2 Sylvan Library on a 7, and that was good enough for me. Didn't feel the need for Rhystic Study, didn't need to find a copy enchantment or a Mystic Remora. I was 3rd seat, and I'm like, man, Sylvan Library is just so powerful, because what I can do is, if I'm able to get Glarb onto the field, we'll kind of mentally play this out. Early Sylvan Library, before we play Glarb, comes around to our turn. You just take 8. You don't even care. You just take 8, draw those 3 cards. You play your Glarb. Cool. Pass. Comes around again. Now on the Sylvan Library trigger, you look at those cards, and if any of those are lands, or if, let's say, one of them is a land, you can resolve your Sylvan Library trigger, put 1 land on the top, keep 2, or 1. Likely you'd keep 2, so you take 4. And then with Glarb on the field, you go, okay, in my main phase, I'm going to play a land off the top of my library. And now you're able to see the top card of your library. And you have now seen 4 cards. You have 2 in your hand, 1 that you just played at the top. You're looking at the top, and you can tap and surveil 2. That is 5 cards. That is 5% of your deck that you have now seen. And as far as percentage goes, that's insane. If you're able to do that turn over turn over turn, and if any additional value engines at minimum, that's a seeing 15% of your deck over 3 turns if you're only keeping 2 off of Sylvan Library. If you're keeping 3 and then you play land off the top, you're seeing 6% of your deck because you're able to surveil. The card is just insane. It's not counterable either. It's not missteppable. If someone's using a swan song on your Sylvan Library, again, it's a question of like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And they say, well, you get value. It's like, yeah, but I'm like, am I? It's like I'm not getting value when you play spells. I'm getting value when it comes to my turn. And like, even then, I'm looking at cards, or I can, it's, in my mind, it says uncounterable on Sylvan Library, because if somebody else is playing Sylvan Library, I'm not countering it. I don't care. You can have your Sylvan. But in this deck, it just makes it like that 10% better. I think lastly, We just got to talk about the lands really quick. I'm on 9 fetches. I think that's been pretty solid. By the time I run out of fetchable targets, I have something like Yavimaya or Urborg or the Dryad in play, and then I don't need to fetch ever, and that's fine. Obviously, we're on Beseju. Beseju is incredibly powerful, but if you have to play it as land for turn, you have to play it as land for turn. Same with Auto War. Ancient Tomb, uncuttable. I don't think I need more colorless mana, but City of Traders, I guess, is always kind of a consideration. But Ancient Tomb just feels really good. Helps you cast Rhystic Study and stuff like that. Can also just give you a burst of mana to do some good stuff like cast a Talisman or help cast one of your more expensive spells. We're on 3 Shocklands, Breeding Pool, Watery Grave, and Overgrown Tomb. Obviously, we're on all 3 of the on-color ones. I'm trying to be as consistent as possible. I'm on like all of the multicolor lands. Yes, I'm aware that Exotic Orchard sometimes doesn't tap for mana when you're on seat 1, but that's really kind of never come up. Whereas multicolored lands, we're on City of Brass, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Mana Confluence, and Tarnished Citadel, which is kind of a land that a lot of people don't consider. This land has really never hurt me. I had to tap it for mana of color maybe twice in a single game. And again, by then you either have a Dryad or an Orborg, or you don't need to color and tap it for colorless, and it's been fine. But I think it just helps that extra like 5% to kind of smooth out your colors. Obviously, we're on the duels, and as far as let's say tech lands or kind of incidental lands, Minimo's really great. It helps us untap Glarb in certain situations. It can also untap the One Ring, and kind of stuff like that. Cavern of Souls, obviously. Glarb is a wizard, and you go, cool. What else is a wizard? Well, obviously, Thassa's Oracle is also a wizard. What other wizards do we have? We have Ifei Trickster. That's a uncounterable. Everything you have has flash speed. Valley Floodcaller is also a wizard. Non-creatures have flash. And Malevolent Hermit. I haven't talked about this card yet. I'm already in the lands. I haven't talked about this damn card. Malevolent Hermit is such a freaking good card. I don't like playing it on the front side, but if it ends up in my hand, guess what? Playing it on the front side. It is also a wizard. It's uncounterable with Cavern of Souls. For a blue, you can sacrifice it, counter target non-creature spell unless his controller pays 3. On the front side, it's okay. Again, like you can just, if someone's trying to go off or do something, you can visually point to your Malevolent Hermit and say, like, look, I have this. Don't push too hard. I'm trying to save this for the next person or whatever. Other than that, if your opponent just pushes and you're willing to do it, they'll probably forget that Malevolent Hermit's on your field. You can just pay a blue and sack it and then counter whatever they're trying to do. They always have to consider it when going for it. So they kind of have to factor in 3 mana or like a Trinisphere type of effect on their first spell or whatever spell you want to counter. So it's pretty good. The backside, however, if I am surveilling on Glarb and I see this thing is going to the bin at the earliest and at the earliest opportunity. Benevolent Geist is going to the bin. The front side goes to the bin. And then you can disturb it for 3 and cast it on the back. When you cast it on the back, non-creature spells you control can't be countered. Everything. And it is so dang good, man. Just having a Benevolent Geist out on the field and passing, it doesn't inherently die to OBM. It dies to Red Blast, of course, or Deadly Relic or whatever. But if they're wasting removal on it, that's pretty good. Um, but it can just sit there, and then it, in a way, kind of doubles up on your counterspells. It makes them uncounterable, obviously. It makes a culling ritual uncounterable. Um, makes a finale of devastation for Thassa's Oracle uncounterable, which makes your Oracle uncounterable, basically. It does so much. It does so much. The other really cool thing is if you're able to disturb it at flash speed with a High Fate Trickster or a Born Upon a Wind on top of a stack war, and if you're participating in this stack war, if this card resolves, it gives all spells on the stack that you control uncounterable below it. That's happened to me probably once or twice where I've done that. Again, it's just kind of an incidental thing, but it is pretty good. I think overall, that is pretty much what I wanted to cover with this list. Aside from the fact that I'm not running Doomsday, not running Reanimator, this list is designed and poised to grind. I am taking, uh, I'm not taking pot shots at the meta. I am trying to control and put things into uh, my perspective or my, I guess, my control. Like I'm trying to deal with Rhystic and Mystic in a way that benefits me or allows me to continue to derive value from Glarb himself, because he doesn't die to Culling Rid. It's not an enchantment. That so I'm reliant on this and relying on the commander to an extent. But there's plenty of games where I don't play him as well. So I think the list is really good. I think it's a bit hard to play sometimes because I rely a lot on politicking or sort of pressure without necessarily playing anything or casting anything. A lot of times I'm playing like land pass, or if I have an exploration, like land pass. Um, and I think that's okay. And it feels in a way wrong to do that, but you're going to hit a critical mass of where people can't really do anything about what you have or the resources you have, or you're just so silently controlling the board that it's really hard for your opponents to play. That's pretty much all I have to say about Glarb. And by all I have to say, I mean I sat here and talked for an hour and 15 minutes about it. Um, I didn't even really talk about the tournament. Uh, the game is going to be linked in the description. The finals game. It was a wild finals game. I copied a Narset, the 6-mana Narset that exiles off the top and copies stuff. That was super interesting. Um, it was definitely a game. I think we were all pretty tired. I think the game could have gone a million ways. I'm not making any assertions that I like played out of my mind or anything like that. I think I played okay all day, and sometimes okay is good enough. And like that's kind of the point I want to get across. Okay is really good if you're okay 100% of the time. Um, if you can win a game of CDH, I think that's like the challenge for most people getting into the format is sort of like winning a game. And then your challenge is like winning, 2 games in a 4 round of Swiss, and you're like, okay, well maybe that's top 16, or maybe I didn't quite make the cut. But if you're able to utilize your deck to um, pretty consistently put up not necessarily threats, but enough value where you're able to do stuff and you're always able to participate, I think that's the hardest part to get over. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this deck. So you might not like this playstyle, and I think that's totally fine. That I think there's a million ways to play Glarb. In no way am I saying that this is the correct way to play it. I think this is the way that I like to play, where I feel like I'm playing Magic. I feel like I'm not I'm kind of like playing that silent, soft control, passive. Uh, I like to use the word parasitic quite a bit. Um, sit back and let people do their thing, and then kind of either win on top or win when there's a window. So that's just kind of what I've been liking about this list. If you have suggestions on ways to do that and sort of cards that might make that easier, I'd love to talk about them for sure. But yeah, I think that's it for now. I'm sure there will be more of this and more content to follow. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for watching and hearing me out. Hopefully, I didn't ramble too much. If I made any errors, that's because I didn't edit this. I'm literally just recording and posting. I'm really not doing much else today. We played a lot of games yesterday, um, and yeah, it was quite the day. Um, I do want to thank a few people on the way out. First of all, I want to thank my wife. Um, she's been playing Magic with me pretty much since I started playing Magic this time. I've been playing Magic. Or first time I played Magic was in middle school. Kind of dropped it when I went to high school. Picked it up again like 2 years ago. So I had like a 15+ year hiatus. We picked it up at the same time. Played casual EDH. Now we only play CDH. She's a hell of a CDH player. If you ever run into her at a tournament, say hi. Catch a game with her. She's insane. She's a turbo player at heart. She's a really good player. I want to thank her. She's been supporting me throughout tournaments and letting me practice. And I'm not saying like letting me practice, like she practices with me too. But I mean, it is time I spend away with her sometimes. So thank her for her support. I did a coaching session with Comedian last week. That went really, really well. We worked on this deck. Um, Told him I'm going to this event, and we definitely made some changes for the better for the list, and we worked on kind of what I was like looking to do, how my thought process worked, and stuff like that. Highly recommend it, especially for people who are kind of struggling to get over that hump of doing well in tournaments and making top cut. Please reach out to Comedian. I think he's the best resource. Watch his videos, book some coaching. Got to play with him at the event. I lost immediately, and not to say that like he just had the nuts. Like turn 3, he had the game, but he was very gracious in his win, and we even got to play a for fun game after that, and I didn't lose immediately, which is super great. But yeah, I mean he's great. Can't recommend that enough. I did shout out Freedom Waffle earlier. I got to meet him at the tournament very briefly. We didn't get to play any games together, but again, I did listen to that podcast appearance he was on. I'll try to link that down below as well. Thank you for, I guess, influencing me to handle the Rhystic study meta in a way that I think probably only I have so far, and kind of push me in that direction. And yeah, and thank you to our local game store, which is Enchanted Grounds in Littleton. The owner, Jeff, is super nice. We've been putting on tournaments every single month. The last Saturday of every month, we're hosting a 1K tournament. I'm not a TO for that. I'm just helping advertise it, helping people find the tournament, put butts in seats, basically. But he's been really supportive of our play group and of me as a player. So I do want to thank them. And last but not least is Level 7 Games in, I think it's North Glen, but it's like Federal Heights up north and north of Denver. Level 7 Games, they host weekly CDH tournaments every Saturday at 5:30. It's $10 entry. You get to play with some of the best players in the area. Jason or Pheno Dreams, he's ranked like 20 or something. Plays there almost every Saturday. I play there. People from Critical EDH or the group that we're starting down here play there. My friend Eric, who's that Blue Farm player I mentioned before, plays there. Really, really great place to play and develop as a player. I think those things are really important. So thank you to all those people and those game stores. Just wanted to say thanks to Fabled Events who put on the event. obviously was really great. Looking forward to the next one. Hopefully, I can do more content about this and more about tournament adventures and stuff like that. Have all that kind of stuff coming up. But yeah, on to it there. Thanks again. Hopefully, you enjoyed watching this. If there's anything I can do to help you out or give you advice as a player or on a deck, shoot me a message. Follow me on Twitter. That's all for now. Peace.